Okay, remember that they're changing my voice. So this should be part 5. We're continuing from Matthew 24, okay? And this is part 2 of Matthew 24, but part 5 of the playlist. So I just read that if those days had not been cut short, no one would survive, but for the sake of the elect, those days will be shortened. At that time, if anyone says to you, look, here is the Messiah, or there he is, do not believe it. For false messiahs and false prophets will appear and perform great signs and wonders to deceive, if possible, even the elect. So there's signs and wonders. That's different than my top martial artist challenge. For example, if when David beat Goliath, someone was like, no, it's me, and pulls a rabbit out of a hat, don't believe him. Okay? But the root and offspring of David, the bright morning star, believe my legal and peaceful top martial arts challenge and see how people are refusing to rally. Look at the history of my videos. Look at the views that they have. At this point, they don't have very many views. And it's been like that for years. And one of these pictures I took of one of my videos, my reposts, only had 27 views. Okay? Because the people that everyone's saying, hey, it might be him over there, are liars. But the person who's like the lightning, right, whose hands have gathered up the wind, it says, surely you know who's the Son of God because he's the top martial arts, right? He holds the wind in his fist. He's the most excellent of men, the mighty warrior. He's morally precise, what have you. Surely you know those monotheistic martial art traits that define the Son of God. And I'm the last person who will ever be a valid representative of God ever again. After my flesh is gone, that's it. See, I have told you ahead of time. And again, it says in the Bible, woe to you when all men speak well of you, for that is how their ancestors spoke of the false prophets. So if anyone tells you, there he is, out in the wilderness, do not go out. Or here he is, in the inner rooms, do not believe it. For as lightning, right? We went over this in my Proof of Christ series. I have a Job series as well, where I connect Proverbs 34 to Job. I think one of them is Job 30. There's a bunch of scriptures in Job that talk about lightning. You know, God commands the lightning to strike its mark. Okay, the storm, I am, and you can see me at the right hand of the mighty one coming on the clouds of heaven, the storm of the Lord. Okay, the clouds are compared to chariots, right? The flashing spears. Okay, the glittering spears, the flashing sword, the sharp double-edged sword of Scripture. Okay, it's clear that we're talking about martial arts, right? A strike, right? He struck Goliath with a stone, and we see in Psalm 118 that Jesus cites as a character in the story. It says, all the nations surrounded me, but in the name of the Lord I struck them. Now, all the martial arts, all the military, all the police arts, all the gyms, all the nations' representatives surrounded me, but in the name of the Lord, my challenge elevated me above them. All the editing of my videos, slowing them down, all that stuff doesn't mean anything. In the name of the Lord, I struck their spirits down, and they've resorted to being feeble and giving in to that beta kind of effeminate part of them that has them continuously harassing me without any reason. They're like have a genetic and a spiritual inclination to do what is despicable and to kind of like those people who torture animals, right? Little animals as a child. Okay, they have an inclination to torture people, or it's sexual sadism, right? Marquis, the mark of the beast, Marquis de Sade. Okay, they're like sad, sore, eros is sore, scrambled, right? They're erotic desire, people's psychology, fake love. You know, their Valentine's Day is erotic desire days. Lupercalia, the day of the wolf. Wolf scrambled his flow. There's a lot of reasons I'm right, and it's right there in their own language. And in Egyptian mythology, Set testifies against himself. Zeus is the Greek equivalent of Set. Jupiter is the Roman equivalent. Baal, aka Baal, is the Middle Eastern equivalent of Set. You know, deity of rape by deception, raping children, storms, chaos, hippos, jackals. Lies in general, the principles of evil, what have you. Okay. So for as lightning that comes from the east is visible even in the west, right? He who has eyes, let them see. So will be the coming of the Son of Man. Wherever there is a carcass, there the vultures gather. And the Bible says Satan fell to the earth in a lightning bolt, and God bathes the sea in lightning in Job. And in Exodus, there's lightning when God's speaking, right? So it's this presence of God. God's being drawn into the world by a prophet, by some event, and he's doing his mighty warrior acts. The Lord's the warrior, the Lord's his name, Exodus 15:3. And in Exodus, again, it talks about the lightning as well. So it also says, I am, right? God says to Moses, go tell the Israelites, I am who I am has sent me to you. Okay. As you can tell, right, I've been reading this stuff for a long time. You know, I really zoomed in on it the last, maybe since 2017. The last 7 years, I really immersed myself in Scripture for hours a day. But before that, I was just talking about morality. I'd read scripture sometimes, and I had a pretty good understanding of it, but I knew the moral essence of it. In 2015, a couple years before 2017, I said that I don't care about the hidden stuff in the Bible, that the Bible is about morals. And that was 3 years after my first playlist was ended. This playlist that this video is about, right, was Illuminati part 137 or 139 or whatever. The Matthew key is there. Okay, Matthew is key in understanding the Bible, and there's a Mark key, and there's a Luke key, and I think I might have skipped over John, and then I read all of Revelation in the first series as well, and you see how it's interesting, right, all these years later. So I was probably about 2000, the end of 2011 to beginning of 2012. I think it was the end of 2011 where I read the Revelation. Yeah, it was in 2011. So we see 13 years later that my interpretation where it matters most is still the same, right? You have to obey God, right? Anyone who sins is a devil. I said in Illuminati part 2 in 2009. So we see 15 years later that it's still the same, right? That faith without works is dead. Like it says in James, that you have to obey God and that you're supposed to rally to me. That's why I'm making videos, to draw people to me and to get them to discuss it with me, because no one else was talking about, you know, the great conspiracy of Satanists, right? Satan is said to be the god of this world, leading people astray. And there's various groups, just like in the Bible, Pharisees and Sadducees and other groups, Roman groups, that were more aligned to the devil than others, who were conspiring against people. In fact, in Psalm 2, it says, why do the nations conspire in vain? So there's this global conspiracy of people conspiring in vain. He said, I set apart my chosen. When I talk about the throne being established in righteousness and wisdom in Illuminati part 1 and part 2 back in 2009, I said they've given the knowledge to the wicked people instead of rallying to a righteous king and elevating him. And to this day, the argument remains the same. And it goes back to when I was 16, when I said people want to ball and ignore the deeper call, right? And ball is a word meaning, going after money, but it also alludes to subtly and otherwise to the deity Baal. Okay, Bible. They want to do the Bible, mere human rules, customs, and traditions, mere lip service, instead of accept the deeper call and with all their heart keep the greatest commandment, which was also something I brought up. I think we went over this in a couple parts ago in Matthew 22. Where it says the greatest commandment is to love God with all your being. And in John it says you must obey the commandments of God to love God. And you must obey God through me to love God. Okay, that's what it's saying. That's what it's getting at, what have you. So let's go back here again, verse 27. For as lightning that comes from the east is visible even in the west, so will be the coming of the Son of Man. Wherever there is a carcass, there the vultures gather. Okay, whether there is the walking dead, okay, because James says the body without the soul is dead, and faith without works is dead. Wherever there's not the work of God, there's these vultures who some people describe as detestable animals. I personally have nothing against them, but in terms of the actual creature, but it's saying that these creatures of the night, these creatures of the dead, like the crow and the jackal and the owl, so to speak, gather. Okay, see. Immediately after the distress of those days, the sun will be darkened and the moon will not give its light. The stars will fall from the sky and the heavenly bodies will be shaken. The stars stand for people's ways. They stand for angels that have fallen when they fall from the sky. The moon stands for the feminine. It stands for various things. The sun stands for the bridegroom, the champion. Okay, the moon can mean, the moon. Sin is actually a moon deity called Sin. Okay, lunar cycle, lunacy, lunatic. There's a lot of connections there, right? We look at the wordplay there, the sun, the S-U-N and the S-O-N, and the good news, right? N-U-S backwards is like the word N-E-W-S, news and news, right? And there's the noose, and they hung people for not being as wicked as they are. They hung people who are evil, and they hung people who are good. Okay, and we see the moon, right? So we get the main and the man-o and the min-o. Min is a deity that was often coupled with Set, where he's a deity portrayed, with an erect penis, and he's a deity of rape, a deity of drugging. Min was the deity of several places. One of them was called Chemis, where we get the word chemistry, right? Alchem, chemet, chemistry, chemist. There's a bunch of stuff like this out there. And even if it was pulled out of someone's hat, 500 years ago or whatever, it still is relevant in that there's some reason that deity is depicted that way. And how do you get that way? And it's safe to say that it has to do with drugs and immoral sex and erotic desire, which goes back to what the devil does, right? Performance-enhancing drugs, sexual drugs, meth, ecstasy, Viagra, whatever. and various things that people use to enhance their sex life instead of focusing on the Spirit of God. And if they happen to make love, then they do. If they don't, they don't. Okay. So it says the heavenly bodies will be shaken. So if the sun goes dark, it means, okay, when it's the end, there's no more sunlight for them. They're done. Okay, the sun's going to rise in a new heaven and a new earth, right? Heaven and earth will pass away. And it says there's going to be a new heaven and a new earth in Isaiah and in Revelation, right? And the bridegroom, the new Jerusalem comes down from the sky to the new earth. See Isaiah, and you'll see that has to be that. And we see also Isaiah 24 and 34, which says all the nations perish, that the earth falls never to rise again. It never has a valid bridegroom and bride again. And we see that in Revelation 18, where it says the voice of bride and bridegroom will never be heard in you again. I apologize if I'm speaking quickly. You have the option to pause and go over it again and again. I'm running out of memory on my phone, so let's keep going here. Okay. Where are we here? Okay, so it says, then will appear the sign of the Son of Man in heaven, and then all the peoples of the earth will mourn when they see the Son of Man coming on clouds of heaven with power and great glory. So the Son of Man, okay, when it comes to them being enriched by the Son, it goes black. When it comes to them having the voice of the bride and the bridegroom possible in their families, it goes dark. But when it comes to them being punished and trampled by me, I'm in the spiritual realm, I'm in my glory right now, trampling their souls for rebelling. Okay, so then will appear the sign of the Son of Man in heaven, in the spiritual realm in heaven, not necessarily in the sky. Okay, in yes and no, right? The sky is a pattern of it. It's a projection of it in various ways. It's and of course there's people in the government manipulating the sky and the weather and the clouds and so on and so forth. But it's in the someone's spiritual sight. It's in the spiritual sight of the righteous. Right, he who has an eye, let him see. He who has an ear, let him hear. This kind of thing, right? And in Hebrews it says, without holiness, no one will see the Lord. So no one's going to see the Son of Man coming on the clouds of heaven unless they're holy. Okay, so what it's saying is everybody who's righteous, right? Because it says, then will appear the sign of the Son of Man in heaven. Then all the peoples of the earth, all the peoples who are still in the Spirit of God. In another version of it, it says, or the tribes of the land. Which one? The Jerusalem in the sky will mourn when they see the Son of Man coming on the clouds of heaven. You see how that's a distinct difference? Where they're waiting for their fairy theater art technology game to have some crazy English guy who's a Jew or something, floating in the sky or something with technology. But in reality, that's not what it's talking about. Wherever there's a carcass, okay, went over that. Okay, so all the peoples of the earth will mourn when they see the Son of Man coming on the clouds, the martial art collection of clouds, right? We went over why the cloud is figurative, right? There's many scriptures that make it clear that the cloud is figurative. Jeremiah 4:13, for example. Look, he advances like the clouds. His chariots come like a whirlwind. His horses are swifter than eagles. Woe to us, we are ruined. And there's a lot. Isaiah 30 is one of my favorite ones. Verse 30. The Lord will cause people to hear his majestic voice and will make them see his arm coming down with raging anger and consuming fire, with cloudburst, thunderstorm, and hail. The storm of the Lord, this conclusive moment that Isaiah is saying is going to come in a very definitive way one day. And that goes back to the Son of Man coming on the clouds of heaven, the cloud burst, the strike. The word is the drawing the sword, the spirit, to spear something, and spirit, right? And God comes back when I was doing my martial arts strikes, okay? And everyone with an eye will see. And it says in Proverbs that don't rejoice over your enemy's fall, but wisdom is going to mock when calamity strikes. There's a lot of this kind of jigsaw stuff. Well, what makes that true? Well, the wise look at this and say, well, you should have done the right thing. Take that, okay? But there's a part of them that's like, man, it's a shame. And that's the kind of things that it's referring to, Okay. Now, and he will send his angels, right? Angels and angles, right? Angles of the Spirit doing its thing. And he'll send his angels with a loud trumpet call, and they will gather his elect from the four winds, from one end of the heavens to the other, right? Now learn this lesson from the fig tree. As soon as its twigs get tender and its leaves come out, you know that summer is near. Okay, and there was the parable of the fig tree where it didn't bear fruit, so Jesus rebuked it and it died and it withered and died. So the fig tree stands for people's kind of stronghold. Their tree is the tree and bearing fruit, right? The true vine, right? The tree that's bearing fruit, and the stars falling out of the sky are compared to figs, and that goes back to whether they're angels doing the work of God or doing the works of the devil, and they've fallen into the trap of doing the works of the devil and teaming up with the devil and making the form alpha shun of the devil. Even so, when you see all these things, you know that it is near, right at the door. Truly I tell you, this generation will certainly not pass away until all these things happen. This is one of the most misunderstood scriptures in all the Bible. It was heartbreaking when I first read it. I started to wonder, about things. I was like, how could that be? That generation's been gone. It's referring, and write this down, it's referring to the spirits of that generation. The spirits, okay? When Elijah came back, okay, there was some disciples there, I forgot who they were, and I think Moses and Elijah came, and he said, should I make tents for you and Elijah and Moses, right? His spirit was there, okay? So their spirits won't leave and go pass away to the new earth, right? Heaven and earth will pass away to a new heaven and a new earth. But my words, the word of God, the martial arts spirit of God, that dedication, that intense focus, moral intensity, that zeal for the Lord, wrap the waters of life in the zeal, the waters of righteousness in the zeal, going up to heaven and coming back down spiritually and figuratively, connecting to God, drawing on the Spirit of God, drawing from the will of God, what have you. The Lord's will, W-I-L-L and W-E-L-L. As not to be confused with people who interpret God's will as being simply ill. And of course, they are liars, because they call Ra, which is God, to the Egyptians and to the Jews who rejected Nimrod's truth. And they do to this day. When's the last time you've seen a Jewish person celebrating Nimrod? Okay, and they call good evil and evil good, as Isaiah said they did. To them, the word Ra means evil. And the word Ra is simply R spelled backwards, alpha R. Okay, I am who I am that I am. Israel, Abraham, champion, see Ham, okay? And ask yourself, if they're so righteous, okay, why don't they tell the truth about these things? Why is this wordplay concealed? Why don't they address this publicly? I've never heard anyone address this publicly, just little snippets here and there. I never heard anyone do a good job, except for me. Why? After all these years, with all these churches, why? Because they are concealing things in darkness where people stumble and fall into a pit and a trap. Okay. So heaven and earth will pass away, but my words will never pass away. The regret of people learning the hard way and suffering forever is part of his words not passing away. I'll let you think about that. Let's just shoot through this last part, okay? The day and the hour unknown. But about the day or the hour no one knows, not even the angels in heaven, nor the Son, but only the Father. The Father is greater, the Son doesn't know. I don't know exactly what happens to a T. God knows. God has the true knowledge, not the scientists. Okay, I know more than the scientists where it matters most, but only God truly knows everything. As it was in the days of Noah, so it will be at the coming of the Son of Man. For in the days before the flood, people were eating and drinking, marrying and giving in marriage, up to the day Noah entered the ark. So they're getting married. A lot of people are still having kids. I keep telling them, don't have kids. And they're like, I want to have a baby. And they're still marrying. They're still shunning me. And he's saying that's how it's going to be. That's how it is right now. They're still being stupid as hell. And the word flood has the word food scrambled into it, which goes back to the works of God. My food is to do the work of God, is what Christ as a character in the story said. And it goes back to the fruit of the righteous is a tree of life. Okay, from the mouth of the righteous comes the fruit of wisdom, okay, and things of that nature. So they don't have wisdom, they don't have righteousness, they're just some kind of worms. 2 men will be in the field, one will be taken and the other left. 2 women will be grinding with a handmill, one will be taken and the other left. There's lots of interpretation. One is Sarah in the sky, Hagar in this world, Galatians 4, right? 2 women. Abraham's 2 wives. The 2 guys in the field, there's Cain and Abel, parallels. Okay. Abel was taken up to heaven after his flesh was killed. And it says in Revelation that the righteous do not love their life so much as to shrink from death. Okay. Go down to verse 42. Therefore keep watch, because you do not know on what day your Lord will come. But understand this, if the owner of the house had known at what time at what time of night the thief was coming, he would have kept watch and would not have let his house be broken into. And his house is like the house of David, right? It's your family house. It's your formation, right? It's who you've yoked yourself to, right? You're not supposed to yoke yourself to sinners. And if you were wise, you would always be ready. So it says you also must be ready. And this is something that's reiterated in the next chapter. And in chapter 26, that's when he's arrested. So this is leading up to the crucifixion in the book of Matthew. Okay. So you also must be ready, because the Son of Man will come in an hour when you do not expect him. Who then is the faithful and wise servant whom the master has put in charge of the servants in his household to give them their food at the proper time? So who them claims, there's another way to look at it, to be of God. What churches, what mosques, what synagogues, what individuals, what gurus, what cult leaders, what people who don't consider themselves church people, who claims to be the wise and the faithful and wise servant, who's going to give them their marching orders, right? The food, the work of God, the commands of God. The Lord is a warrior. They're warrior marching orders. It will be good for that servant whose master finds him doing so when he returns. When I returned, nobody was doing that. It was just my parents and I, and something to be said about my brothers, my little brother significantly more than my older brother, and that's it. It will be good for that servant whose master finds him doing so when he returns. Truly I tell you, who will put him in charge of all his possessions. And I'm the top martial artist ever possible. What do you think God will put me in charge of? Like I say to the naysayers, if you think magically that Jesus magically isn't Christ, and obviously I'm Christ, I'm Jesus, then who do you think I am? What do you think God's going to put me in charge of? Look at what I've done compared to anyone you've ever heard of. But suppose that servant is wicked and says to himself, my master is staying away a long time. They're like, oh, life is long. It's not so short. And he then begins to beat his fellow servants and to eat and drink with drunkards. He then begins to yoke himself to these monsters who made a society where people get beat and raped and killed. And there's children getting beat, wives are getting beat, what have you. The master of that servant will come on a day when he does not expect him, and at an hour he is not aware of. He will cut him to pieces and assign him a place with the hypocrites, where there will be weeping and gnashing of teeth. Again, this weeping and gnashing of teeth is a recurring punishment in Matthew. It's in the Bible again and again. It said that's what's going to happen. They're going to go to hell. The smoke from their torment will rise forever and ever. They will weep. They will gnash their teeth. They won't be able to bear the pain. Okay. And in Psalm 118, it says, all the nations surrounded me, but in the name of the Lord, I cut them down. The word used is cut. We see in the same chapter in Verse 9, it says, then he will be handed over to be persecuted and be put to death, and he will be hated by all nations. All the nations hated me by their spirits and actions, and they surrounded me spiritually and action-wise. And in the name of the Lord, I cut them down. And when they're cut down, okay, I'm at the right hand of God, they're cut to pieces and assigned a place with the hypocrites, where there's eternal disgrace, as they went out like bitches instead of being men who obey God through me. Virtue means man. Instead of manning up in a morally precise way, which is the only way to man up, okay, they're labeled a hypocrite, a punk, a bitch, a coward, a pussy, a pansy, a sissy, a pushover, an easily led astray, gullible like a sissy, deranged, unruly female type of bitch. Them and the females who made a similar mistake. Thank you. Can you imagine someone who's dumb enough to hear this video and to think that the person making it is magically, mentally ill, bipolar, or arrogant? How could they not know that they film me and they covertly edit the sound in my videos to make it so I sound arrogant, sometimes gay, sometimes weird, sometimes they add weird background noise. They try to make it so I sound mentally ill. And they have the power to edit it and edit it again, so when I make that argument, they can confuse people about what is going on and make it seem like that I'm magically mistaken or something.